Hello everyone, welcome welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and in today's video we're wrapping up 2025 with all of my reading statistics, percentages, graphs, it's all here. So I'm gonna scoot way over because I've got lots of graphs to show you, and let's get started. First we're going to talk about basic statistics. Did I reach my 2025 goals? How many books I read, that kind of thing. I actually had a goal in 2025 to read less books. The previous year I read 190, I was over 200 in the prior 2 years, and it was almost becoming obsessive for me. So I wanted in 2025 to focus on other hobbies, not just reading. And so I read 155 books in 2025, and I think that's great. I hit my goal of 150. And I definitely spent a lot of time gardening, playing video games, spending time with my friends, my husband, my dogs, trying to get into an exercise routine. We're still working on that one, but I was able to pursue other things and have time for other things as well. So I'm happy with that number. My average star rating was actually pretty high this year. It was 3.95. I did a little bit of rereading this year, which does always account for some of that why that average is so high, but I was also putting books down when I wasn't enjoying them, and I was being more intentional about what specifically romance books I was picking up this year. Romance can be really hit or miss for me, but I've been finding that if I pay attention to the actual synopsis and decide if it's truly something I'm interested in or not. I was kind of letting hype or other people's opinions sway me and picking things up because I'd heard about them, not because I was actually like familiar with the synopsis and invested in that story or wanted to read that particular story. So I was just a little bit more discerning this year. I could still be better about that, but that's some of the reasons why this number is maybe a little higher than other people. I don't know. I'm only really comparing myself to myself, so it's pretty on par for me. A couple of stats that I track is how many books that I read that have trans representation, whether that be an author or a character, disability representation, polyamorous representation, and queer characters, and whether or not the author is queer. I don't try to dig too much into the author's information. If they want to be closeted, like I didn't dig too deeply into people's private lives to figure it out. So there's some wiggle room with these numbers. The number of books that I read that have trans representation is 37. The number of books I read with disability representation was 55. I read 7 books with poly representation. I need more good poly books that aren't just glamorizing that lifestyle or sexualizing that lifestyle. I need more of these. I read 59 books that have queer main or side characters, and 28 books were written by queer authors. So I'm really doing good on my queer books. So I'm pretty happy with those numbers. I don't have specific, like, I need to read this many books. It's just a stat that I track and try to be mindful of how many books with these identities I am picking up. I also track how many books I read that were written by BIPOC authors, and of the 155 books I read this year, 36 were written by BIPOC authors. That is a little low. Every year I'm about 30% of books, or a little bit less than that. It's more like 25%. And this year it's a little bit lower percentage wise, and so I would like to be more intentional about picking up more BIPOC authors. One of the reasons I was reading fewer BIPOC authors this year is because I was trying to read more classic fantasy. I was just trying to find, lists of what are some good classic fantasy from the 90s, the 80s, that kind of thing, and a lot of those lists are composed of mostly white authors, which there are authors of color from those time periods writing fantasy, but the lists I was finding were very white. Now I can, now that I know that, I can go and try to dig a little bit deeper and find other books by BIPOC authors and focus on that. My average page count per book was 352. That's pretty good. I read some novellas, I read some short stories this year, I read some tomes, you know, anything in between. It's all good for me. Now we're gonna show graphs. The first graph we're gonna show is how many books that were new to me or how many books I reread. So of the 155 books I read this year, 120 of them were new and 35 were rereads. I love to reread, and so this number feels good for me. I had some intentional rereading this year that I really had a good time with, so that's that. Another stat that I track is where I acquire these books, and this one's a little bit more colorful and fun this year. Primarily, I still get most of my books from the library. 99 out of 155 books I read were from the library, which is great. I loved that, but I also had access to Everand this year. I was trying out that service, so I read 9 books through Everand. I still have access to Everand, I just don't reach for it as much. I try to use my library, and you know, when a library book comes in, I only have a certain number of days to read it, so I prioritize those books first. 27 books I had owned prior to 2025, so books from my shelves, books from my digital library that I already purchased. 18 books I purchased brand new in 2025, whether mostly audiobooks, let's be real. And then I had a couple books where I read the audiobook, but I bought the physical book also. You know, like you do. But I did utilize my library a ton this year, and so I'm super proud of that stat. Speaking of audiobooks, let's talk format. 132 books of the 155 were audio. I'm an audiobook girly. I love to listen while I'm doing other things. It's more accessible for me with my hand and wrist pain. So it's just what works best for me. I read 18 ebooks. I read four physical books. Look at me go. And currently I'm in the middle of a physical book. So 2026, I'm coming for you with that stat. But I love audiobooks. It's never going to change. It is a skill, I think, and a practice, but it's what works for me. Then we look at nationality of the author. Obviously, I'm in the US. I live in Minnesota. Primarily, what I read is from US authors. A lot from the UK as well. You know, English-speaking countries. It makes a lot of sense. But we have a wide spread from other nations as well. 10 books from Canada, which is cool. Gotta, you know, read more from our neighbors to the north. A couple from Australia, which is cool. Ireland, Japan, New Zealand, all sorts of places. I don't really have specific goals surrounding author nationality. It's just something I'm curious about. Next, we have genre. So my primary genre is fantasy. It is my favorite genre. So of course, the bulk of what I read is fantasy. So 72 out of 155 are fantasy reads for me. Then my next highest genre is romance. I have read less romance this year, which is a goal. Again, a goal I had was to read fewer romance books. Not because I don't love the genre, is because I needed to be more intentional with my romance reads. And so I think I was pretty successful. I didn't have too many romance duds this year, and so I'm pretty happy with that stat as well. And then my third highest genre is sci-fi. I think I read 16 sci-fi books according to my graph here. I would love to read more. I just have a hard time finding them, and so primarily what I consume on YouTube is booktube accounts, and a lot of people, not as many people talk about sci-fi reads, and so I think I just gravitate towards fantasy, obviously because it's my favorite and more people that I follow talk about fantasy. But yeah, I would love to more sci-fi recommendations. I already follow Tori, but yeah, sci-fi I need to invest more time into. I always say that every year. I read a couple of classics this year. I read some straight fiction, which is weird for me. Of course, I always sprinkle in a couple of nonfiction. I read 10 horror novels this year, which is pretty great for me. I also enjoy horror, so I kind of want to read more of that as well. And a thriller or two. Look at me go. The next graph is going to be super overwhelming, and I apologize in advance, but I kind of started tracking subgenre this year, or attempted to. It's sometimes hard for me to categorize books into subgenres, but here we go. Yikes. But as you can see, the two highest subgenres that I have is classic fantasy, so fantasy that feels, you know, kind of sword and board, medieval inspired, you know, those types of tales. And then we have contemporary romance is at 20 books. So of the romance I read, a lot of it is contemporary, but actually a historical romance. I read 10 historicals this year as well. I actually really love historical romance quite a bit. And of course, a lot of what gets published and talked about on the internet is contemporary romance, which, you know, great, but I need more historical recs as well. But anyway, that's this graph. It's super colorful and a little overwhelming, but you know, I read all sorts of things. So there you go. Next, we'll do the BIPOC graph. So I already kind of talked about this. So 36 of the books that I read were by BIPOC authors, and so that's only 23%. Like I said, I'm anywhere between 25 and 30% most years, and so I'm a little low. We already kind of talked about the reasons for that, so it's definitely something I want to be keeping my eye on in 2026. Age range, as I get older and as the years go on, I just read more adult works. So 136 reads this year were adult works for me. 16 books were YA. I had a couple books that kind of bridged the gap, and so I put both both adult and young adult on the age range. The Lycanius trilogy. Let me know if you think that's adult or young adult. I'm on the fence about it. And then a couple middle grades as well. A lot of my YA reads are also rereads, childhood favorites from when I was a young adult, so makes sense. And the last graph I'm going to show you is publication year. Obviously, a lot of things in recent years, but I kind of just wanted to show this to show, like, look, I'm reading some older works as well. I'm reading some things from like the 80s, 90s, and some classic literature as well. I did try to read classics. I read all of Jane Austen's works, or the rest of Jane Austen's works this year, which was kind of a fun project. So there you go. That's what this looks like. Again, I don't have goals around this one, but I do try to get a mix of brand new releases that are coming out that year, but also backlist titles as well. And now every year I add to the stat comparison chart that I have. So I compare a couple of stats across years, so y'all get an idea of kind of what my reading trends over the years are like, not just last year's stats. So here is that chart. You can see I started tracking things kind of digitally in 2020 when I started my YouTube channel. And so you can see all the way up to 2025 with the different things that I wanted to track year over year. So as you can see, books read, we've talked about this already. I read 155 books, which is fewer than all previous years, except for 2020. But that was intentional, and I'm pretty happy with 155 as a number. That seems to be a good goal for me. Pages read, of course, because the number of books I read was fewer than in previous years, my page count is lower, but 54,000 is still quite a few pages in my opinion. So my average rating was 3.95 this year, which is almost identical to my 2022 average rating. Apologies if the angle is a little different. My phone is running out of battery, out of storage. Oopsie. So we better wrap this up. So we were talking about average rating year over year. My average page count is 351, which is a pretty reasonable page count to me. Apparently in 2024, I was reading a ton of tomes. Who knew? But we're in that 300, mid 300 range, just like previous years. And of course, like my last few years, my top genres are fantasy, then romance, then sci-fi. That's the same as the last 2 years. 77% of the books that I read were new, which is the same as 2022, which is kind of fun. In previous years, I had read probably more books and just more new reads, which is totally fine for me. And 63% of the books that I read were from the library, which is great. I love that number. That makes me really happy. Despite having access to other library, audiobook apps like Everand, I still really heavily rely on my library. We love that for me. Last year was 56%, so I'm glad I was able to bump up my library usage quite a bit. I hope you enjoyed perusing my 2025 reading stats. What's something that you track in your reading? I'd love to know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye!